So the other question that always comes up is, where do you find the money? So can you walk us through, so you start with zero, and you have an idea,
Yeah.
and you start putting together the team, and you start sort of kicking the tires and figuring it out. But at some point, the meter starts running and you need money. So can you walk us through your fundraising journey?
Yeah, so there are actually different ways to do this. The way that we did it is we first of all, we started by self-funding. So myself and my co-founder, Ken Koloji, who's the CEO, we actually used our own money to fund the initial part of the startup. And then we found the angel investors. And now we are applying for seed funding from VC companies. And we're also applying for the NIH SBIR reward, the Small Business Innovation Reward. And you can, it really depends on where we started. Since we started outside of an academic setting, we started as an independent company that is not a spin-off of an academic project. We had to start it by self-funding. If you're starting inside an academic setting, you can actually get a lot of grants that can help you fund your projects, similar to the SBIR grant, the STTR grant, and so forth. It's depend on the specific situation that you're in. Eventually, when it takes off, you're eventually going to have to raise seed money on VC funding, and that's a whole another animal. But yeah, that's how we did it.
Okay, so a couple of questions. You are a full-time assistant professor at the University of Massachusetts Medical School, no?
Part-time. Yeah.
Part-time. Ah.
Yeah, I recently just went part-time, but I was full-time for a period of time where I was doing both at the same time. Yes.
Okay, so that makes it even more interesting. So so this issue has to do with who owns the IP when you're an academic professor. So when you came up with this idea and decided to do what you're doing, were you a full-time employee on the medical school faculty?
I was, yes.
All right. So as someone who is a full-time employee of the medical school faculty, there are issues concerning who owns the IP. So you said that this was not a medical school spin-out. So walk us through what that looked like. I mean, how did you wind up where you are? Because traditionally, if you're a medical school faculty person, and I've been through this a million times, you don't own the intellectual property. Because of a lot, the Bayh-Dole and all that stuff, typically what happens is the university owns it, and if you want to commercialize it, they basically license it to the spin-out. Or if it's something else. So walk us through how that worked.
Yeah. So for us, it worked because we don't own the IP of the core technology. That's actually owned by the University of Bern. Because it's owned already by a different university, we didn't develop the core technology. Then it didn't really matter if I'm a full-time employee at a medical school. But your point is very valid. If I would actually to develop the core technology, then it would have been owned at least in part by the University of Massachusetts. Unless there are ways that you can get I can't remember the specific term, the legal term of the document, but you can get a letter of waiver of the rights in whatever you have developed. And I know examples of that has happened before.
Right. So what you're referring to is the tech transfer office. So typically what happens is, and incidentally, this is not unique just to academic medical centers. It also applies to private integrated delivery networks that have nothing to do with academics. Yes. So a couple points. One is that if you work for if you work for a large private hospital system and you're asked to sign an employment contract, which you will be asked to do, be sure that you understand your rights to intellectual property. Two things happen that I see as big pitfalls. One, it's not included in the employment contract because it's a private enterprise now. You're not going to invent anything. We're just hiring you to see patients and make money. Second, you don't read the contract, and it is in the contract, but you don't understand it. So when you are working for, you know, the best hospital in the world, Inc., and you invent or discover something using the substantial resources of your employer, what are your rights to the intellectual property? So that's something, it's just two tips I would give you. And if you're in that circumstance, you need to think about it.
No, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. So, so that having been said, so it sounds like you licensed the technology from the University of Bern. No?
Yes, we licensed the core technology, and then
Okay.
we did further development for it. Yes.
Okay. And when you did that, you had to execute a licensing agreement, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So walk
Yeah.
us through. Now, my guess is, and correct me, well, let me ask the question.
Yeah.
Did you know anything about licensing agreements when that happened?
I didn't. Our CEO, Ken, knew about licensing agreements, and he was the one who took this over. We also had to hire a firm company, a legal firm company out of Boston that have experience with licensing agreements, specifically in the medical space. And we had to hire a legal firm out of Switzerland because the laws are different. So
Right.
the legal firm here in Boston had to, communicate with the legal firm in Switzerland to come up with and negotiate at the same time with the University of Bern and with the new SOMA. So it took, I think, from the time we started till the agreement was actually finalized and executed, it took about 6 months, I think, which is not bad for academic centers. Actually, it can take a lot longer than that.